Continuing with primitive types and memory allocation, we are now looking at class demo B. Here, I have declared two global non-static fields x and y. In addition to the main method, we also have a non-static method m1 in this class. I'm using the next few slides in this presentation to explain how the stack and heap will be used when the main method is being executed. I will walk you through each and every line of code. In the main method, I have declared a1 and a2, which are local variables of type int. b1 and b2 are references of type demo B, which is the current class. The memory allocated for a1 and a2 will be 32 bytes each and will be loaded in the stack. The references b1 and b2 will also be loaded in the stack, and the memory allocated for b1 as well as for b2, each of them will be 4 bytes. But the objects that these two references will be referring to will be loaded in the heap. Objects are loaded in the heap, and primitive types are loaded in the stack, as well as the references that points to the objects will also be there in the stack. When m1 is called in memory, then the local variables in m1, that is v1 and v2, will also be loaded subsequently into the stack. And when obj1, which is of type object, which is the basic class for all classes that we create in Java, which is java.lang.object, the full qualified name, the obj reference will be loaded in the stack, but the new object will be loaded in the heap. In this slide, we join the code at runtime while main has been executed and the first 3 lines has been completed. Have a look at the stack and heap here. First, memory is allocated for variable a and the value 234 has been assigned to it. In primitive types, the memory allocated for the variable will be used for storing the value, whereas in objects, references will be stored in a separate memory location where 4 bytes of memory will be allocated to it, whereas the objects will be loaded in the heap. The 4 bytes that is allocated for a reference is sufficient enough to hold the address of the object once it is instantiated. So notice here, a1 is in the stack and the value 234 is stored in that very same location where a1 has been declared. Similarly, I'm assigning a1 to a2, so another memory is allocated for variable a2, 32 bytes will be allocated for it, and a copy of 234 will be created and stored in a2. Now we are moving on to the third line where we are creating a reference b1 of type demo B. So now memory is allocated for b1, but in that location null will be allocated. So what will happen here is, if you try to use b1 now, you're bound to get an exception called null pointer exception. Next, line number 4, the new object is created. Now memory is allocated in the heap for the new object. The constructor gets called, and as a result, the global variables x and y is now loaded as a member inside the heap. Please notice x and y are primitive types, but because they are members of the class demo B, so they are loaded inside the heap itself. The value 100 and 200 is allocated to x and y, and b1 now has the address of the new object in the heap. Now the next line is executed where we are creating a new reference b2 of the same type demo B, and instead of creating a new object in this case, we are now assigning b1 to b2. Now unlike a1 and a2, instead of creating a copy for the object, the address that exists in b1 is shared with b2. So now b2 also points to the same object that is there in the heap. So in this case, b1.x and b2.x will be the same, and b1.y and b2.y will be the same. If you change the value of x or y from b1, the modified value will be accessible from b2. Now, very interesting part, the method m1, which is a non-static method, is called from b1. Doesn't matter whether you call it from b1 or b2, you're calling the non-static method m1 from b1 reference. Now what happens is, in the stack, memory is allocated for method m1, and the variables v1 and v2 are loaded in the stack. The respective data 500 and 600 will be loaded for v1 and v2. And then the third line in M1, which is an object creation. Object is a class, and hence instances of object will be loaded in the heap. So when you execute the line object obj1 equal to new object, then obj1 is loaded in the stack. It's a local variable, it's a reference, 4 bytes of memory will be allocated to it, and the new object statement will create an object in the heap, and the address of that new object will be stored in obj1. With that, M1 execution comes to an end. So what happens now is, the memory allocated for method 1 will be reclaimed, which means the variable v1, v2 will be removed from the stack, so is obj1. Now notice very closely here, though the memory allocated for obj1, which is the reference, is removed, obj1 is no longer in the stack, but the new object created in the heap continues to be here. And these kind of objects that does not have any reference to it from the stack or from anywhere else are called as garbages or orphans. This is how an object becomes a garbage. It does not have any reference. The method that created the object no longer is running, and hence the references that existed to it does not exist anymore. So this object is still in memory in the heap, but it is not reachable, not accessible, and hence those objects are called as garbages. Now memory is reclaimed. B1 at the end is set to null. The moment B1 is set to null, you can see in the diagram itself, B1 is not referencing to the object, but whereas B2 continues to be in the referencing the object. Now here we receive a number as a string, and remember, when two strings are added, they don't end up actually being an additive operation, they get concatenated. So when I receive an input data from a keyboard, it actually will be in a string format. So I need to convert it into an integer and then add them together. So what you notice here is S1 and S2 actually holds two numbers, but they are of string format, and as a result, I have to convert the data inside S1 and S2 into an integer. For that, we use a service of a class called integer, which has a method called parseInt. Notice all the methods in Java starts with a lowercase, and then the subsequent words that form part of the method will start with the uppercase. So the p in parse and the I in int will be, the p in parse will be lowercase, the I in int will be in uppercase, and all classes start with uppercase, so the integer I is in uppercase. Integer is a class that has a static method called parseInt, and by calling that parseInt method, you can convert the data in S1 from string to number. So now C1 will contain the value 1, 2, 3, 4, but as a numerical value. The same is true with S2. We convert the value 500 in S2 into an integer. So C1 will be a number, C2 will also be a number. So when you add C1 and C2, technically an additive operation will take place here. Well, now let's look at wrapper classes. A wrapper class is a class that is used for boxing primitive types and converting them into object references. For example, when I declare a variable int x is equal to 100, we know that x will be loaded in the stack with the value 100. And it is not object oriented, it does not give you polymorphic behavior. You cannot pass this variable x and its value to any method that takes an object as an input. Now, can I convert a value in a primitive type into an object by creating an object wrapper to it? Yes, Java provides its wrapper classes. Integer that we saw in the previous class that allows us to convert a string into a number is technically a wrapper class. Now if you notice here in the first line where we declare an int a1 equal to 2344, which is actually a primitive type loaded in the stack. Now by passing the value a1 into the constructor of the class new integer, that an object gets created, the value 2344 gets copied into that object, and technically a reference is created. So y is now an object reference, and it points to the memory, to the object in the heap, and it contains the value 2344. We call this technique as boxing, creating an object wrapper for a primitive type. Now we can compare two primitive types using the equal to operator. Objects can be compared with the help of a method called dot equals, whereas we will have to compare two primitive types with the help of the equal to operator. I have two variables C1 and C2. Both the value was similar, but they are two different copies. I can compare them with the help of the double equal to operator here. This is how you compare two primitive types. Whereas if they are objects, then you would probably use the dot equal to method. This dot equal to does not work with primitive types. They only work with objects, and hence I've commented it out. If you try to run it, then it will give you a compile time error. Remember, at the beginning of this lesson, we discussed the size of a stack, a normal default size, and it doesn't grow. Unlike a heap whose size keeps on growing after a garbage collection, if the memory is insufficient, we saw that the heap size will grow from 64 MB to more, but not in the case of stack. So once the stack is full, it throws a stack overflow error. So let's have a demo of that. So in this code, we have two methods, M1 and M2. And what technically happens in M1 and M2 is they keep calling each other infinitely. So if I call M1, M1 will in turn end up calling M2, and M2 in turn end up calling M1. So they call each other, and this is recursive operation and goes on endlessly. I'm also declaring a double value here, and thereby I keep allocating more and more memory as they keep calling each other. At some point of time, I would expect my stack to become full, and I would get the stack overflow exception. So let's try to run this particular code. Run as Java application. And there you are. I have the stack overflow exception that has come up. Remember, we discussed about the depth of method in a stack. If I keep on calling one method at the other internally, so how many such methods can I keep calling? And here is this program here that I'm trying to demonstrate just that. Recursively, I'm keep calling deep within itself, and I'm also printing the information here in depth. I will not be able to demonstrate this particular code from Eclipse. So because the console here, the debug console here is not sufficient enough, the cache size is not sufficient enough to demonstrate it. So I'll have to go to the command prompt and from there demonstrate it. I've compiled this code. Look at the full qualified name of this class, com.lessons.day3.primitivetypes.find stack depth. So I'm about to run it, and when you try to run a Java class from the command prompt, you would have to use the full qualified name. And when I run this, it should print the value of deep as it iteratively keeps calling each other. And you can see that we've already crossed 2000, 3000, 4000, 5, 6000, 7000 is already crossed, 8000, and we have come to the end. So if I just navigate up, I should be able to see the largest number printed, which is approximately 8400 in this case, and so that is the number of iterations that has happened. So that is 8407 nested methods has been called in my case. So winding up this session, let's quickly summarize what we learned in lesson 3. I walked you through the Java data types. There are two types, that is the primitive types and the objects. And we discussed about the memory allocation for stack and heap. We discussed about variables in Java, the different 3-4 types of variables based on where they are declared. We saw global variables. In global variables there are two types, static and non-static, and then local variables declared within the function or method, and then parameters that you declare in a method. We went through examples of primitive types and issues in primitive type, and we finally today now saw how to convert a value in a string into an integer using a wrapper class integer.parseInt. Similar wrapper classes are available for all the other numerical primitive types like say long, float, double, and so on. Wrapper classes are used for boxing primitive types as objects, and when you basically load it on collections, when you want a primitive type to be stored inside a collection, you would need a boxing to be done. That is, I take a number integer 100, I want to store it in a list or an array list, then I probably need to box it and then store it in an array list. And if you want to compare two primitive types, you would use the double equal to operator and not the dot equals method. And I demonstrated how to create a Stack Overflow exception, and we also saw how many nested methods can be created for within a stack. With that, we come to the end of this session. We will meet again soon with a new topic. Thank you very much.